we moved into the second part of the session, which is a panel discussion. I will not have to introduce Mr. Dave, I already did. So let me call to the stage Mr. Shakti Kumar Singh, which is Chief Manager of R&D in the Escort Group. Shakti worked as a manager of the engine design and testing of the Escort Limited. Please. And he began working in 2011 prior to working at Caterpillar. So it seems that this is part of the whole process. We go to Cummins or Caterpillar. He started with International Tractor Limited in 2007, and he has educated in HBTI Kanpur, where he gained a postgraduate qualification in CAD, in CAT. And he has published several technical papers in SCI and other international journals. So may I call now Mr. Ganesh sorry, I may not pronounce it properly. Ganesh Magankar, yeah, Manager Application Engineering from Deutz India, please. He has been working in Deutz as Manager Application Engineering. He has completed his diploma in mechanical engineering, and he has started his career with the associate company in Kirlochar Oil Engine Limited in 1995 as a service engineering. So he strongly believes in the appropriate selection of engine and its power integration in accordance with application requirement. I think that's a good point to already maybe start the discussion, but let's get there when we get there. So we have this panel, but before we start, let me just spend 2 minutes in maybe indicating what is happening in Europe. And I will do so because I think India is looking into Europe, and I would like just to clarify certain aspects. In Europe, the non-road mobile machinery part is a large, I call it sometimes a tailor drawer. So everything that is not on the road, it will be inside that regulation. So it covers from handheld equipment, so we're talking about chainsaws, until very large megawatt gensets. And in the middle, we have all the tractors, all the building equipment, from power zero to power whatever. And we include as well rail locomotive and rail cars and inland water vessels. So we have a large, let's say, grouping, which is very homogeneous. Now my understanding from the India side is that the non-road is a dedicated essentially for agriculture equipment, so tractors and alike, and from building equipment. And you very kindly explained to me that for historical reasons, there is a change in the building between track and, let's say, rubber wheels. Okay, so what I would like just to start is from that statement that I just read, which is the appropriate selection of engines and its proper integration in accordance with application requirement. And that's nothing new for India. I think in Europe we have seen as well the same thing, where you put in any application the bigger engine that's possible, although maybe it's not requirement. So I would like to hear your opinions on that. And maybe we can start from the right side. Okay. Yeah, you have to.
Okay. Why that thought came into my mind? Because I'm an application engineer, and when we sit with the customer for, say, for supplying any engine, so our OEM or say end user do not elaborate his requirement fully. He just informs this, what is the KW requirement, what is the torque requirement. And when we supply the engine, that at the time of integration or commissioning time, we came to new shocks. Oh, you want this, the airflow will be in this direction, and you want the emission norm should be tier 2 or tier 3. You want the electronic engine. So these type of shocks we get from our end users. Of course, not the OEMs like established OEM like Sandvik Asia or say Atlas Copco. But there are many OEMs in India who are making the machines by purchasing engines from Kirloskar, Cummins, from Deutz, buying the transmission from ZF, and integration and doing the integration. But the final result of the machine doesn't work on the field. We have a lot of issues like ventilation of fresh air and hot air, diesel supply. To listen this, it seems to be very easy point, but when at the time of performance of the machine, it fails. So the appropriate selection of the engine and the complete equipment should be in line with the requirement of the application. Now, when we are talking about tier 4, so in case of tier 4, we should be more open for the installation of the engine on equipment, actual equipment. That means when we are moving towards tier 4 final from tier 3, that is BS3 to BS4, we will require the higher size of cooling packages. To cool the EGR will be the additional responsibility for cooler. And the customer, the construction equipment has to also install the hydraulic eye coolers, hydraulic tanks. So there is no enough space available on the machine to suck the fresh air, to throw out the hot air. And this is the mentality of some of the OEMs that no, construction equipment means is like this only. So there we will not provide any additional space for that. So we have to change this mentality. And when we move to tier 4 final engines, we have to be very, very cautious about the air intake depression. That means air cleaner element, air intake connection should not have the more bends. Similar to exhaust connections also. If your exhaust back pressure is more, you will have the less EGR and more emissions. So that is why the installation and appropriate selection of the engine is playing vital role. That is what I think.
Thank you. Any other comments in that direction?
I just want to add over that whatever Ganesh has mentioned. I'll put it with the example, because when BT3 emission norms was implemented in India in 2011, so that time companies like Escorts, Mahindras, or other tractor manufacturers, they launched a vehicle with the turbocharged technology, which was very new for the Indian prospects. And the turbocharger was like turbocharging, they have done around say 30%, 40% over the last, the capability of the engine. And all models, whatever was expected from the performance prospects, that was not performed in the industry, and then the people shifted from the turbocharged to the naturally aspirated. So the selection of the engine and its marry with all the transmission or the complete vehicle integration is very much important.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I think I've covered some of the points, but I maybe a little bit stretch this discussion in a area. So yes, I think the points which are mentioned today are talking about very simple technology integration for the end user, which is different from passenger car or commercial vehicle. And in that scenario, adding an after treatment or a common rail fuel system becomes a very complex work for OEs or engine manufacturers. So that big change has to be managed very well to ensure that the customer doesn't suffer. The moment customer suffers, it pushes back to the industry and say that, okay, I would like to have that change. So I think we have to be ready with that thought process, because we're talking about a change which is not 1 to 2, it's 1 to 100. And that way, it's very, very important for us.
Thank you. Yeah, just a note. I would like to be this trilogue or quadrilogue. I would like to see as well in an interaction from the floor. So if you would like to add anything to what the panelists are saying, please get your hand up, and I will give you the word. Please. We don't have a mic. Okay. Please.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Himanshu and I am from New Holland. And my question is to the whole panel. Like Mr. Shakti just now mentioned that in 2011, every OEM moved with a turbocharged solution and then eventually had to retract with that. So my question is that everybody till now is mentioning that we will be having the common rail solution with an ATS. What is then likelihood or a probability that this will not happen in 2020? That we give a solution of CR with a common rail and we again, since the customer acceptance is not there and one or the other OEMs then move to a mechanical solution with an maybe an heavy after treatment system or an EGR solution.
So I'll try to answer it in a simpler way. What I foresee is, and I think the emission norms are kind of helping us in that regard. 37 kilowatt and below, no change in emission. Most of the customers, most of the volume satisfied. You would have less challenge. Yes, as we are transforming as an industry to the remaining volume for like higher end technologies, that would help us. It has to be a OEM response to the customer that, okay, when you take this solution, you don't touch it. Up to the point it remains like that, a reliable solution, I think so, can work. But definitely it would be prohibitive. And when it comes to the solution you have proposed, mechanical plus heavy after treatment, I think so, it's a very difficult proposition for the end customer because he's going to pay for it every day, the amount of fuel he burns. So, although the choice is his, but it's difficult knowing as an Indian customer myself, it would be very difficult for me to buy a thing which I have to refill every day and it costs really heavy for my operations, my view.
I just want to express my view over the challenges which is coming in 2020 for above 50 HP or say above 37 kilowatt segment. The point is we are only say having 10 to 14% of concentration. I mean the volumes above 50 HP, declared above 50 HP. And the possibility, one more possibility is there because of the complexity. It's a possibility is there that the customer may migrate to the lower segment based on the simplicity, at least because they are having an opportunity to run for next 3 more years. So there is a challenge for the OEMs to say give a product which should perform because it is having a complexity, but at the same time it should have a reliability so that it should meet the customer needs, because it is going to cost at least say 15 to 20% more than the current cost. So that kind of challenge is also there.
Okay, thank you. But just like Mr. Dave mentioned that still, do you think that there may be a choice available to industry to have this kind of a solution?
Solution you are
like you mentioned that, okay, having a mechanical system with an after treatment system would penalize to the customer in terms of fuel economy and everything, but that means the solution could be available at that time.
Yeah, means like I can't say that the solution would be available or can be made available for that norms, but I just answered your question that if you have that solution, what it would be like, and if it's cost prohibitive on daily basis, chances of it to succeed in the market are very negligible. But do I have answered this question that solution is available or no? I don't know, to be fairly honest with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please. I think that has become, which I'm
Hello.
very happy.
I'm Shekhar Gupta from JCB India, and my question is to Mr. Shakti Kumar. Basically, seeing the tractor volumes in India, as Mr. Keswan also mentioned, 6 lakh tractors per annum, and you also forecast with BS6 introduction, maybe farmers can tend to move towards the lower horsepower because the solution would be, say, the mechanical engine continuing. So what do you think from the perspective of environment, should India would have done something different than what has been observed in Europe for lesser than 37 kilowatt? Because volumes in Europe or other developed countries are much lesser, minuscule, lesser than 37 kilowatt. But however, in India, it's other way around. What's your take on this?
Because we are having 85% volume for less than 50 HP, so if government can reduce a minor in terms of say PM or NOx limits, that will give a same kind of advantage in the environment. So my prospects, if government can reduce minor in NOx and PM limits for less than 50 HP segments, I think that is better. This is my viewpoint.
See, at one point we are talking electrical mobility, lot of negative pressure, and all towards the cleaner, greener fuel. And at another point where the volumes are significantly high, we are keeping it as it is for next 7-8 years. So, sir, maybe if from the European perspective, if you can add your experience or like the way it has been evolved in Europe, Euro 5, Euro 6, considering the NRMM power segments.
Okay, yes, in Europe we call it stage 4, stage 5. That's, just to make the life difficult to everybody, we call it different things at different stages. For example, in the light duty is Euro, but it's Euro with a Roman Arab number, so Euro 5 with a 5 is for light duty or passenger car. If we have it in a Roman number, that will mean for heavy duty, and if rather to be called Euro is called stage, then it's non-road, okay? But that's only just for clarification. And we like to make things complicated. You call all stage 5 or Barat 5, and we don't understand what is going on. In Europe, in the stage 5, which is the last stage that we have published last year, and that have been developed in all the terms this year, we have essentially aligned all of our emissions to the American emissions side. Either we're aligned on the 56 and above kilowatt power range, and even up to 36, because you know we have power range from 0 to 19, 19 to 36, 36, 56 and above. What we have done in this stage 5 is to include to reduce NOx in some cases, because we align with Americans, include all the engines that were not included in the previous stage, stage 4. And when I say all the engines, means that we are including snowmobiles, which I don't think that is something that you need here in India. We include all-terrain vehicles, side-by-side vehicles. We increase the power range for, as I said, we include in the non-road the rail. But as I said, the change between stage 4 to stage 5, for those power ranges that you were talking, which is the smaller one, there had not been a change in limits. They are the same limits. So, and that brings me to a question, and I'm going to be a bit provocative, which I think in the direction of the gentleman. Now, if I understood, for those engines on the lower range, there is no change of limits. My understanding as well, that might be wrong, is that the business situation in India is that there is a large number of machines, let's call it machines, that are in that end. So I think that we have been already discussing the impact that is expected if just doing a very, very fast calculation is basically none. I mean, going from stage 3, let's call it, to stage 4. However, there is a big commotion in the industry saying that this is a very fast and high jump. However, the impact is not going to be there. I mean, or I am totally wrong.
I think so. That is the point which I made in my presentation as well. Is yeah, that's a very conflicting statement, and while you stand on that side, there is no justification to low volume, no change, or as like Mr. Shakti was saying that do a minor change, because we would not like to expose ourselves to a bigger change. So yeah, in totality, I would say, and there is a complexity as you asked as well. what is the change between wheeled and tracked machines, correct? Or those are non-wheeled, they're still out of the purview. So if you see on non-road machines, I definitely double your thoughts and say that in certain aspect we are making it very complex, and in majority of volume we are not making that impact. So that something needs to be considered. But I can tell you from where it is coming. So it's coming from Europe only, because at stage 4 you didn't include the lower volume, lower horsepower product in Europe, which you corrected in yourself in stage 5. So that same approach or the correction would be applied by India as well in a scenario. That's how I understand it.
Please.
One more point, like, because I'm just thinking on the other side of this, because this norms is coming for above 50 HP. So in that condition, the volume is less, the business will be affected. I mean, the area where it will be affected is less, but the learning will get, whatever learning will come for the OEMs, which will be implemented for 2023 onwards, that will be huge.
Okay.
So that learning will be implemented for lower segments, because of the 3 years of the field experience will be there with all the OEMs.
You would like to?
Yes. After adding this exhaust after treatment system, I want to highlight this point. Basically, I am from the service. So serviceability will be the bigger issue for exhaust after treatment systems for tier 4 engines. Because in construction equipment, the equipment is so congested that man cannot reach to the engine. He has to remove a lot of accessories. And especially we are in BS3. We have choice of mechanical engines as well as electronic engines. My company as well as a Deutz, we are supplying electronic engines, and we have already burned our fingers at many sites because of adulteration of fuels, mishandling of electronic control units, non-standard electronic wiring, etc., etc. But when BS4 will be in force by October 2020, we will have no choice for mechanical engines, and by that time we have to be ready and enough competent to attend for the fault diagnosis, or say maintain these engines, because that is also important. Because nowadays for construction equipments we can get the roadside assistance from the local mechanics. They can easily come, they are easily accessible, and they can come and attend the machines. But when it comes to the tier 4 final engines, we have to have the electronic controllers, common rail diesel injection system with high pressure up to 1500 to 1800 bar, and we have lot of sensors. It is totally electronic engine. It is a smart, intelligent engine controlled by the electronic controller. So we should have the proper knowledge, and our team, service team, should be get proper training for that. Not only the service team, but operators who is going to maintain this equipment should get the training at the time of selling of the equipment itself, so that he should know what is the importance of each sensor. Because in our country, it's a practice to bypass any sensor, to cut the wire and just run the machine in case of emergencies, or if any fault is there. So such practices cannot be continued with tier 4 final engines. So that is my view, that serviceability we will have to improve, especially in tier 4 final engines. We have the CAN control lines for different sensors. When we start the engine, we have continuous communication of sensors with the engine control unit, and if for any chance, for any instance that communication fails, ECU has alarm, ECU derates the power, and you don't get the performance as per the desired power. So to understand this electronic engine, we should upgrade ourselves, we should upgrade our knowledge, and make the other competent also. Because many times, you know what happens in case of CAN communications, we see the 2 wires are connected properly, we get the desired resistance, but still fault is there. We are not able to identify or diagnose that fault. So when I was discussing this problem with my German colleague, he said that when I go to site, I go with the different sensor. My bag is full of different sensors and tools. But here the condition is not like this. We don't have so much sensors in stock, say standby control units we don't have. So accordingly, we have to upgrade our knowledge to handle these electronic units properly. That is what I want to say.
Thank you. Any comments on that from the floor? No, well, I would like just to comment on what you said is true. The change from 3 to 4 was not addressing the lower power range. However, they address what is the business structure in Europe, which is the 56560 as a number of units and as a contribution to the pollution of our cities. So, totally right. It didn't address it, and maybe the Indian government followed that, but the structure of the business is slightly different. So let's move to the next point I would like to touch with you. This morning we have, let's say, I call it a preview of the non-road. We have an addressing in one of the 2 sessions from the Tractor Association, Manufacturer Association of India, where the claim was that the fuel quality is let's call it the Achilles tendon of the whole system. Now, again, provocative. If most of the machines in India are on the end part, there is no change. So, is that true? Is that the quality of the fuel and the availability of the fuel going to be the Achilles tendon of the whole regulation?
I think you got my nerve here. Very rightly said. Actually, the complexity. I think so. Because I was also hearing that speech, so definitely, my mind was looking at that conflict itself as a challenging thought. But what I was able to read was like, even you talk about 50,000 numbers, if they remain in that segment, which is 37 plus, definitely they would see a big change, and which means you need to be prepared for it. And the practical problems in remote areas, I think so they were very rightly highlighted. But I think so unless you get ready for a change never happens. So I think the government initiative or approach has to be commended on the other side, that you have, even if you are getting less time, you need to get ready sometime. So get ready now.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Any comments from the floor? Yes, please.
Because of the adulteration, of course, because of the sensitiveness of the parts, electronically controlled engine is having a very sensitive pump, very sensitive injectors, and very sensitive rail. And at the same time, because one time fitted, it's fine, but ultimately when service come into picture, and if it will be, say, requirement of replacement will be there because of the adulteration fuel, that will cost more as compared to the existing products. So that will be the more challenging from the maintenance or service side also.
Thank you. Yes, the other point I would like to bring in line with the stringency and the time is the timing. I mean, from the industry side. Is the timing that is in front of you something that is achievable, or something that is so challenging that you don't see that you will get ready by the 2020 for stage 4 of Bharat 4, and to 2023, I think, or 24 for 5?
Because most of the OEMs are exporting to European countries, so they are almost ready with the technology and engines. So achievability is not the issue. Only thing is the adaptability by the customer will be the challenge, and the right kind of information to the end customer will be the challenge.
So we return to the availability of the right quality of fuels and the structure to distribute that fuel, not only in cities, that might be much easier, but even in the rural areas that evidently is more difficult. Please.
Yeah, I think it's basically we're talking about a total change in the discipline we follow. So it's a very big change. Time, definitely, whenever you give, time would be always less. So you have to respond to the situation, and I think so industry should be able to respond to it. The only thing is, as I think is rightly mentioned, is, or you even catch those specific things, is if you go to remote areas, whatever good logistics or supply chain for fuel is in India is available, and the quality is also very good. But when you make a in the last lap, if the end customer is bringing that fuel in a very bad situation, then that practice is going to spoil whole effort which has been done. So 95% or 99%, if you're correct, even that 1% can change the whole dynamics of the situation.
Thank you. Any other points on this, please?
Thank you. Actually, I have more of a comment to make over here. Like Mr. Shakti correctly said that all of the manufacturers in India are having the technology available with them, and they have been exporting it to the other European and US countries from here. And right now what we see is that we need to validate or applicate or application of those engines or vehicles into according to the Indian scenarios. What I'm feeling is that the complete onus is lying upon the manufacturers only. I don't see whether all the component manufacturers who are also here, are they also taking any pains to develop parts which are according to the Indian conditions. I mean, they are also aware the kind of the duty cycles that a tractor has to go through over here, and everybody is saying that these are the sensors that may not work under the with certain mud or a wet condition. But is there any effort being taken by the component manufacturers to support the engine and the vehicle manufacturers in this regard? So this is sort of a comment from my side.
Any?
I would like to say about this that instead of designing the component in that way, why don't we, make our habits good? That everyone is saying that in India adulteration cannot be stopped. But as Mr. Shakti said, as Mr. Anupam Dave said that good things should be started, and there is always less time for the good things. So when, as we know, the construction equipments are meant for the production of some things. It is working in the mining of highway. So whenever there will be the actual loss of production because of the adulterated fuel, and when the machine owner will come to know to this, and he will penalize the culprit. So definitely this will stop. It will take time. Definitely we will face problems because of adulteration of the diesel. But I do not agree that we can design the parts suitable for this adulterated fuel. We should make our habits good, and we should provide the pure fuel to the engine, which is needed.
Okay, thank you, sir. Actually, adulteration is one factor or part of it. If you look at how the tractors run in the field over here, the puddling condition and all of us have seen those famous videos in the meetings where the puddling condition, the tractor lies submerged in the water up to 50%, 60%. And everybody is thinking that whether the sensors or other components would survive into that condition. I understand that adulteration is bad and we need to improve those habits. But if we cannot ask the customer and the end customer not to use this tractor into those conditions, he would just spun us away. So what kind of efforts our component manufacturers are going to take into this direction? Everybody is making components over here considering that the end product is being exported to European or US markets where these kind of applications don't happen. And the onus is being kept on us as the engine manufacturer or the tractor manufacturer or the construction equipment manufacturer.
I'll give one example just to give some brief over the effort the component manufacturers are putting. If you consider the FI system, the CRDA system, and considering the case of Bosch, so in that condition, if you'll go and ask, I want a FI system for off-road, and if you will say yes, the same system I want to use for on-road, so he will say no. I mean, this has been developed especially for off-road, which is more ruggedized, and it is qualifying the duty cycle requirement of the tractor. So that kind of validation they have done for those parts, and the kind of validation cycles they have defined, and I mean, because they are involved from day one, so that they are participating along with the OEMs for validating the product. So they are doing that kind of improvements in the parts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
In the few minutes that are still in front of us, I would like to touch the other points that I have in my. I took a lot of notes when you do your presentation, and that is the alternative fuels, the electrification of the machinery. And with electrification, I try just to instigate discussion. The electrification on the local point will be, I think, very positive. However, we should look into the well-to-wheel part. I don't know what is the electrical structure of the Indian power production, but it depends where the electricity comes. You are really doing a good thing or the opposite. That's the one side that we would like you to discuss or to talk. The other one is the biofuels. And of course, in Europe, we have a long discussion on the indirect land use changes. In other words, in very easy answering is the change of land that was producing food to change that land in producing power crop. How sustainable is that from an India perspective? So anybody could start there, both in electrification and on the biofuels.
Yeah. So I just looked at my colleagues and I said, let me take this question first and they will help me. So I think you very rightly said, and I think I presented that view in my slides as well, that electrification from an India perspective in today's power scenario, although I'm not an expert to say that, but I definitely agree that it is not positive because it results into negative emissions which you do not want to like to have. Because we are like more or less thermal power based country. So the amount of electrical energy we generate, I think we emit more emissions than required. In that scenario, diesel with after treatment becomes a very positive technology, if I were to say that. But in my presentation I said that it's very important for us to look at how US has adopted the norms, and I definitely appreciate that approach of well-to-wheel calculation for any application. So they've been very thoughtful in changing or regulating that act versus Europe or China, and they've been evidently saying that if you do well-to-wheel and improve, that's a good technology to invest. And if say suppose tomorrow, because in India there's a lot of buzzword for solar energy as well today. If that becomes the primary trend, then I would say that, or 10 years down the line when electrification becomes a necessary step, then I would say that that's a very positive step thought today, because 10 years the volume increase, the energy mapping for this country has changed. So with looking at these two scenarios, I would say that it can be a positive move, assuming a lot of things happen. Definitely coming to the alternate form of fuels, my view is that like there are multiple options. So if you are using bio waste as an energy source, definitely agree with the thought. And one good thing I think so as a policy in India they have done is they've identified that the crop which would be used for like Jatropha or any other biofuel ingredients has to be separately targeted. So it should not be kind of like competing with food crop. So in that scenario, that policy stays in for government of India, that you would not divert any food crop into biofuel versus use plainly. But yes, if the land is insufficient and if you're not able to do that, in that scenario that becomes challenging.
Any comments from the floor? Yes, please.
George from Integer. I think you've all raised some very clear and very candid points. Coming from our conference in San Antonio 2 weeks ago, a comment was made which I'd like to share with you all. The comment was in terms of, at the moment there's a wave of discussion which is fueled by, of course, the Dieselgate in terms of electrification. It is a big topic that obviously India is being subsidized and is, of course, a future potential solution. But I think all we need to take into consideration is it is revolutionary technology, but essentially it's going to be taken place at an evolutionary pace. It's not happening tomorrow, but it's going to take some time. So it's just a comment rather than a question, but just to put everything into perspective, it's more of a long-term thing. It's not going to happen tomorrow.
Right,
Thank
he
you.
said.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay, if there is any other comments that you would like to bring to us, otherwise I see the time is up, so we should give a round of applause to our panelists. And I think there has been a very good discussion. I'm very glad that there has not been, as I said, a trilogue. Has been an interaction from the floor, which I think is important. Otherwise, we just talk about on ourselves. Now, there is a change of let's say, schedule. Now we should have a break for coffee, but we thought that that would be better if we just finish up the session with the next talk. And so after that, you are free to stay or to leave, and we finish up the day. But before that, I thank again to you. I thank to Mr. Dave for the presentation and all your thoughts on the future of the non-road or off-road. I don't know how you call it in India, and all the participants from the floor. So now, thank you very much.